My guest this week survived abuse, homelessness, extreme poverty, cancer, and a devastating surgery, and somehow managed to turn it all around into an unparalleled story of healing. Allyne Betancourt's body did what doctors thought was impossible. This is a story you don't want to miss. The views and opinions expressed by guests on Next Level Healing are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of the host. The information shared is intended for educational and informational purposes only and should not be considered medical, psychological, or professional advice of any kind. Always consult a qualified healthcare professional regarding any questions or decisions about your personal health, diagnosis, or treatment. Welcome to this episode of Next Level Healing. I'm your host, Dr. Tara Perry. Today, I'm joined by a woman whose story challenges what many people believe is possible. After undergoing surgery that removed a significant portion of her rectum, she shares that she experienced a level of healing that her physicians did not expect. Her journey has become well known within the Dr. Joe Dispenza community, and today she shares her experience in her words. Please join me in welcoming Allyne Betancourt. Welcome, Allyne. It's so nice to see you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's lovely to be here with you.
So it was at the 10-day Advanced Dr. Joe retreat in Cancun in December of 2024 that I heard you go on stage and tell your story with amazing grace and eloquence. And I know you're not a professional speaker, but you were so centered in your heart because this story was so precious to you and really is a tremendous guiding light to others who want to maximize healing and getting into heart and brain coherence. But if you could just take us back in time, when did you first receive a diagnosis that you had to pay attention to? Just take us back into time.
I was diagnosed in July of 2020 with advanced colorectal cancer. And in that appointment, the first thing the doctor said as he held up the picture of my degenerating rectum, he said, I'm going to refer you to a surgery and you have to have everything cut out and you need a colostomy bag. And that's going to be your life from now on. That was my first exposure, what was going on.
That must have been horrifying.
You know, it was so interesting because I think for most people it would have been horrifying. Because I've had such a hard life, I was traumatized and abused the first 1/3 of my life in many horrific ways. And I've spent the next third of my life learning how to overcome that hatred and that trauma and that anger. And so when things come to me, I just kind of go, wow, what now? I was not horrified. I was surprised. I didn't feel like I had cancer. I had no symptoms. I had no problems. I had no issues. There was no reason to believe that cancer was in my body. But I was very calm.
And then what happened?
And then I'll try to condense it because I love to talk, which can be a problem.
It's okay. I think a lot of people would love to hear the details of your unbelievably incredible story.
Well, I decided I live out in the country, so town is always a drive. So it was a long drive home. But I turned to the doctor and I said, well, no, I won't be doing that. I used to work as a medical sign language interpreter, and I worked with patients who have had ostomy bags. And I said, that's not a life for me. Not that there's anything wrong with it or bad. And he immediately said, well, then you're probably going to die. As we drove home this long country road, I just started saying how I was going to treat the cancer, how I was going to approach healing. From the moment we got in the car, I said, I'm going to heal, which seemed virtually impossible because what the doctor had described was they called it T3 colorectal cancer, which means it's so severely advanced. They don't know how long it will be before it completely goes through the wall of the rectum. And in the picture, you can see there was very little pink tissue, almost none. So the medical professionals were looking at it as it could be 1 week and then it metastasizes to your organs. It could be 1 month, but that's why we have to cut it out. Well, the very first thing I did was I said, this is not my cancer. I don't own it. It's out there somewhere just circulating in the universe. And it said, oh, look, there's a host, and it landed in my body. And my very first reaction to it was, I'm going to evict it. This is not your home. It doesn't belong to me. And as an aside, throughout all of the treatment that I went through for the next 7 months, every time someone would say, well, let's talk about your cancer, or let's, update me on your cancer, I would correct everybody. It's not mine. I don't own it. It's cancer. It's the cancer. But if I wouldn't own it, because I felt like if I owned it, that would keep it in my body. So it was one of the very first things that I did.
I love that. I actually had a similar experience when I was in the hospital, and they said, don't ever expect to get your body completely back. And I was furious because I had enough exposure, apparently like you did too, that I thought I had more control over. And I made a giant red delete button in my brain, and I pressed it with every amount of energy I had. So then what happened?
Hey guys, studies are showing that 68% of people that watch podcasts regularly don't click the subscribe button. Do me a huge favor. If you like this content, click subscribe so other people know where to go for the cool stuff. Thank you.
So then I was scheduled. I refused the surgery, but the process with the traditional medical oncology is you have to meet with a surgeon first. So I don't know why I'm meeting with a surgeon, because I'm not planning on surgery, but I had to go through the motions. Had to go to a different state. I'm in Idaho, and I had to go to Utah for my treatments, and saw a surgeon, and the surgeon was the same thing. Well, if you don't have this removed, you're going to die. And that was a very common theme through my treatment, because I would not adhere to their fear. And that is what that was. It was their fear, their limited exposure to alternative treatments, and not only treatments, it was my attitude. And from the beginning, I struggled because everybody hated my attitude. My attitude was not what they were used to. No, I'm not going to have surgery. Anyway, I started the process of looking into the chemo. Let me back up. When they finally gave me an appointment with an oncologist, I had an MRI. He's looking at the MRI, and I said, I'm going to cure this cancer. And this guy was like, yes, you are. We're going to cure your cancer. And I thought, oh, wow, a Conrad here. No, it was radiation chemo surgery. And that was their approach to cure. We're gonna kill it with poison, and then we're gonna take it out. And I started the process of looking into the chemo, the radiation, trying to condense it. I did go through all of that, and I'll get back to that. But I also looked at, what can I do as a healthy person? What can I do to cure this cancer in other ways, not just the radiation and the chemo? I looked at alternative medicines. I look at natural paths and things like that. I took a lot of organic vitamins, and I decided on that first day that I would not put anything in my body or on my body unless it was organic. So we live on a farm. So I reached out to my neighbor and I said, can I buy a steer from you that I'll raise out here in my pasture, 100% grass fed, so I'll know that I'll have healthy beef because I am a carnivore. And I read a lot of books by doctors who approach cancer in alternative ways. Fasting is a huge piece of getting healthy, and I made a determination based on what's the name of the book? I'm trying to think of it. It'll come to me. Dr. Fung, who talks about fasting.
Right. He wrote the complete book of fasting.
Thank you. That was it.
The UCLA physician. I appreciate his work very much too.
It's fascinating what fasting will do.
I've done it myself. I did 3 7-day dry fasts, which most people are not familiar with dry fasting, and that's based on the work of August Denning. And I'm neither one of us is giving anybody medical advice. This is just our experiences and what we've done. So yes, I'd love to hear. How long did you fast for?
I decided that, and I had read an article somewhere. Looking back, I didn't keep any of the articles I was reading because I had no idea I would be in this position 4 years later, 5 years later. But I had read an article about how there was some research done on fasting before chemotherapy and how it would help the chemotherapy to be more effective. And I thought, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to make it as good as it can get. So I would fast for 5 days before each chemo treatment. And that was a challenge because what I discovered was it worked so effectively that I had reactions that the doctors had never seen. From the poison just infiltrating my body. It started with the radiation. So I had radiation first, 5 days of radiation. And the oncologist, who was Asian, she was like, oh, yeah, fasting is great. I intermittent fast all the time. So I thought, well, great. This is, she was very supportive. The only doctor I had encountered in all the time who was supportive. And I did the 5 days, and she basically said, you might have some cramping, you might be a little bit uncomfortable, but really most people are fine. They have no problems. You're going to be okay. 5 days of radiation, 2-week break. I was supposed to start chemo. Well, on the night of the last day of radiation, I got violently sick. I started with diarrhea that just was nonstop. And because I was driving to Utah, I had to drive home with this intense diarrhea. But when I called her, that, ended Friday, I called her Monday, and I was so sick. And she said she had never seen anybody have that reaction, ever. So
I'm curious, why do we think that is? Because typically fasting decreases from what you're talking about. I believe at the Norris Cancer Center, they looked into that with rats and fasting, and how if they fasted before they did the procedure, that they had much fewer symptoms and very high levels of living through it without symptoms.
And that's what I had read, so I was surprised. And I don't think that I have an answer because none of these doctors cared to even hear me say I was fasting, let alone. And I didn't have a naturopath that was following me because where I live, the nearest one is 5 hours away. And so I don't know. What I believe may have happened is the fasting somehow made the poison so intense in my body that it had that adverse reaction. At the same time, I think it made it work much better. So, okay, I was sick, but I feel like it was working better than it would have. So I never regretted doing the fasting.
Well, I think a holistic person might say also from the holistic background that I come from, the skin is a nice way that the body throws things off, but diarrhea and vomiting is another way that the body gets rid of poison. So that is interesting. And so then where did your journey take you next?
So then I started the chemo, and I had a very adverse reaction to that too. The very first chemo treatment I had something the oncologist I was working with had never seen. I had immediate full body neuropathy when they stopped the chemo, 4 hours of chemo. They took out the IV, and all of a sudden I couldn't feel myself breathing. And so I was gasping for air. And of course, they called a rescue team, and they came and they said, you're breathing. I couldn't feel myself breathing. And I called the pharmacy that following Monday at the Cancer Institute. And the pharmacists, of course, they know this stuff. And they said, your cocktail is too strong for you. You need to ask your oncologist to lower it. He refused. My body eventually acclimated, and I was able to get through the treatments and feel like I could breathe, but it was a challenge. I did 7 months of treatments. Again, I wasn't a good patient. They would say every 2 weeks. And if I didn't feel like it, I called them and I'd say, well, I'm postponing it for a week or two. You're going to die if you don't follow what we said. There was that recurring theme. And what I realized as I went along, that most of the treatment is based on controlling the patient with fear. If you don't do what I say, you're going to die. And every time they said that, I was like, then I'll die, because I'm not going to live like that. So then I'll just have to die. And I think too, that comes from a lifetime of trauma and overcoming that trauma, that I'm able to say that with a feeling of calmness, no fear. I refuse to play into their fear. And anyway, by the time I had the second treatment, the third treatment, and 7 months of treatment is a lot of treatment. The brain fog started to set in, and it was very intense, and it just took a hold of me. And I spent most of those months not feeling like me. I would sit in my chair if my family came. My daughter would come up from Utah every 2 weeks and cook all weekend and make us meals to freeze, because I couldn't do very much. I was getting so sick. And everybody would be talking in circles around me, and I couldn't participate in the conversation, not like I can now.
Right.
Certainly a little bit, but not much. And that got worse as the chemo went on. Nothing changed.
What was the decision point like when you did finally decide to do the surgery?
What happened was, we got to the end of chemo, and then they came up, it had always been radiation, chemo, surgery. Well, I started saying, I don't want surgery. I don't think I need surgery. And they were like, yes, you have to have surgery. If you don't have surgery, it can come back and you will die. The continuing thing. So they did a CAT scan.
You said it can come back. Did they have anything that showed that it wasn't there at that point?
They did a CAT scan, and they basically said it's inconclusive. They couldn't see it, but But their approach, the traditional medical approach, is it doesn't matter if we can't see it because CAT scans aren't usually that clear anyway. So I was like, okay, can we do an MRI? Can we do a PET scan? No, we don't do that with this type of cancer. And I've since learned doing other research, the treatment plan for colorectal cancer is very unlike a lot of other cancers. I mean, if you look at breast cancer, they'll often take out a portion, see what it looks like, maybe test it. If you've got cancer in your arm, they're not going to rush to cut off your arm. They're going to look at other things. They don't tend to do that with colorectal cancer. And my personal belief is that because they haven't had a lot of success with it, there's still so much fear based around it. So we just better cut it all out. So we started with this back and forth. Well, we have to take it out. And me saying, no, I'm pretty sure I cured my cancer. No, it's impossible. There are going to be some cells there. No, I'm pretty sure. Back and forth. They refused to do an MRI. They refused to do a PET scan. And I was not up to the cognitive level that I normally am. So I started struggling with arguing with them. And the fear mongering was affecting my family, with my family going, okay, we don't want you to die. And I kept saying, I'm not going to die. Well, I just had a sense that there was no more cancer. But because I wasn't strong enough, I was pushed into this surgery. I saw 2 different surgeons. I tried to get them to say, we'll just take a look, maybe, let me back up. Sorry for jumping around. Sometimes I forget important pieces. I had returned to see the original surgeon at the Cancer Institute. And I asked him if he would do a scope up the rectum to look at it to see if it was going away, if they could see anything, if it was still that bad. Because I thought, well, I'm doing all this traditional treatment, I'm doing this non-traditional treatment, and I'm feeling pretty good about what I'm doing. And so he agreed to do a scope, and he looked and he said, well, I can't see anything. And I said, well, doesn't that mean that it's being cured? No, doesn't mean that.
What non-traditional things had you done up to that point?
The fasting.
Okay.
I did only eating organic food. I got to the point where I think it was probably after 3 months of the chemo where I only started eating raw fruits and vegetables, organic raw fruits and vegetables. And I'm a Buddhist and I chant. And so I was chanting 2 to 5 hours every single day during.
What kind of state do you get into when you chant for that length of time?
It can vary, I'm not always perfect, but it's a rhythmic. Chanting is very different than meditation because chanting is more outward. And when I chant, I just feel like I can get in complete melodic rhythm with the universe. And I don't chant with a mentality of, oh, I want. It's not that. It's, let me just connect to the strength and the power of the universe. Seeing myself cured, seeing myself, and again, I still never owned that cancer. I mean, you will never hear me say I had colorectal cancer. You'll hear me say I was diagnosed with colorectal cancer. And so during the chanting, I could lift myself up and connect to a higher power, not a higher power outside of me, but to connect like this. So that helped me tremendously. There were days I was sad. There were days that I was tired. I was exhausted, especially when the brain fog overtook me. It was a challenge to get up out of bed and do anything. It was a challenge to face life, but I was never afraid still.
And what was the point that you did decide to do the surgery?
It was probably 2 months after the chemo ended, maybe a month. And the pressure from 2 surgeons, 3 oncologists, my family, and the fear started to sink in. But I kept asking them, can you just take out what you see if you see any cancer? No, we don't do that. And that's something that I was having a hard time arguing with them about, because that's their approach to colorectal cancer. What they do is they say, well, this is how much cancer you had. And even if we can't see it, we know that the cancer is still there, that it still exists, and that there are cells around here and around here. So we're going to take out from here to here. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. It didn't matter how much I begged. It didn't matter how much I pleaded. And
so they were going to take a big piece regardless of what they determined to be there. Is that what I'm hearing?
yes. And they refused to look in advance. And even the morning of the surgery, I went into the surgery, and I've had a lot of time to think about this, not wanting it, clearly not wanting it. Also knowing, I just knew I didn't have any more cancer. I knew that there was nothing left. And I knew the surgery wasn't going to help me. But I also knew that, it's so hard to say this because I know a lot of people misunderstand. I knew that had to happen to me. I just knew it.
Wow.
There was something intuitively, I've always been intuitive. When I was a child, I knew when to hide. I just knew before the storm came. So I knew that I had to have that surgery. Went into the surgery, and the morning of, we were going in, and I even still asked the surgeon, if you don't see anything, will you just not take anything out? No, we don't do that. So I had the surgery and woke up in the recovery room, those dark, closed rooms, no windows. And the moment I opened my eyes, instantly, I knew I had made one of the biggest mistakes in my life. It just washed over me. One of the doctors came in laughing, having a great time, because, oh my gosh, this was the best surgery ever. You're so skinny. The robot was wonderful. It was so fun. The first surgeon, who didn't even ever come back and see me, was laughing during my surgery. And the second surgeon was telling me that. And I was, tears were running down my face, because I knew my life had changed that moment. I knew it. He never even noticed. So that was the beginning of the next phase of my life. It
Wow.
was
And what was that like for you? Because I know there was a drastic change at that point.
huge change. So when you have they call it a resection, when they take out that part of your rectum and the colon, and then they cut it and they put it back together. So
Do
they
you know how many centimeters they took away?
out of, well, in terms of the rectum, it's rectum can be between 12 and 15 centimeters. They left me 3 centimeters, which is technically the rectum, but literally the anus. And then the colon, they took about 8 to 10 centimeters. So it was a fair size that they took out. And even before, again, backing up, I kept asking before the surgery, well, what will life be like? Will I have bowel control? Will I be fine? Oh, you might be incontinent for a week or two, but you'll be fine. That was what the surgeon kept saying to me.
And what was the reality of your experience?
The reality was, well, I had so I had an ileostomy bag because you have to have a go around while you're healing. But I was so determined to heal and get through this. The ileostomy bag was a challenge because it was positioned in such a way, it was right at the top, almost at the top of the small intestines. And so I would eat, and then it would immediately fill up the bag and start leaking. It leaked a lot. I had a lot of issues with leaking. During the time that I had the ileostomy bag, I lost 1 pound a day. And I had already gotten down to about 135. I mean, I'm a large woman, so that's a lot of weight loss. So I pushed to have the surgery, the reversal, quickly. So it was done at 3 weeks after the surgery. They made me go through a barium enema, which was a nightmare. And then after that, I thought, well, okay, I might have incontinence. She said a couple of weeks, whatever. I didn't have bowel control again after that. I lost complete bowel control because basically, when you take out that portion of the rectum is designed to hold your bowels until your anus can feel that pressure, and then you can release, right? And I'm sorry if I'm giving too many details.
No, it's perfect. This is what we're here for.
But without a rectum to hold, you have constant nonstop sensation to move your bowels, because that's what the anus is designed for that sensation. And that's all I had. I no longer had that holding space. And so 2 things happened. One was that with no place for my bowels to be held, they just kept going and going. And the other thing was 24/7. All the time, I felt the urgency to go to the bathroom. Even if I wasn't going to the bathroom, even if I wasn't passing my bowels, I felt like I had to. So 24/7. So I wasn't getting any more sleep because I felt like I had to go to the bathroom all the time. And I wasn't able to live my life normally because, I have to go to the bathroom. I have to run to the toilet. And I never realized how much waste our bodies hold. It's a tremendous amount of waste. And I was barely eating anything. Barely eating, and it's just nonstop. So that's what I was faced with. So it changed my entire life. And then, so 3 weeks after that, I went back to the surgeon for the lab results from the first surgery when they took out the better part of the rectum and the bottom part of the colon. And as I said, I had kept saying to her, I know I can cure this. I know I can cure this. And I also experienced a great deal of ageism. Comments like, oh dear, it's, it's, it's very rare that anybody cures this kind of cancer. It's not likely to happen to you. So I go back for the lab results and I'm crying because my life has totally changed. If I go out, I'm having to wear diapers or risk, incontinence out in public. Very, very dehumanizing. And so she's talking, and why are you crying? What do you mean? Why am I crying? My life has changed. I don't have any bowel control. Oh, you'll be fine. Very dismissive. Clearly, I picked the wrong surgeon. But so she hands me this paper, and I said, I'm not sure what this means. And she said, well, there was no cancer in the outlying areas. I told you they take out this. And so we didn't find any cancer. And I said, I told you there wouldn't be. And she said, oh, well, we took out a mass 3 centimeters large. We took out a malignancy 3 centimeters large. And I was just like, okay, whatever. So I went home and, tried to live my life as best I could. And after 5 months of that and no change in control, I started looking at things online and finding that many people faced the same fate, being told, oh, you'll be fine. You won't have incontinence. And then only having incontinence. It's not a life. I'm a traveler. I've always do things, and that's just not a life.
So what did you do?
So after 5 months of that and getting sadder and depressed, and I keep going back to my history, but I've never been depressed. I have never felt like, oh, this is so terrible, and I'm just going to sit around and cry all day. That's just not been who I am. And so I started getting very depressed, and my husband started getting worried for the first time because that wasn't me. And finally, after 5 months, and I said, you know what? I can't do this anymore. No, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to live like this. I'm ready to go. This is not a life. There's no sign that I'm going to gain any bowel control. And I just don't want to live like this. And I did feel like, well, you've overcome a lot of things. You've done a lot of things. And you've had this wonderful Buddhist practice. And you've learned how to not be an angry person and yada, yada, yada. It's okay. It's okay to leave. And that worried him. And he said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, I don't want to live like this. And so I spent several days chanting more and trying to figure it out. And I had dabbled in some of Dr. Joe Dispenza's work on YouTube, which there's not a lot of meditations out there, and listened to some of his YouTube lectures and talks. And I thought, I don't know, I just don't know. I was very calm, and I was perfectly fine with this being the end of my life. And my husband's like, okay, this is not okay with me that you just say you don't want to live anymore. I'm a little bit concerned about this. So after several days, I sat down with him and I said, I don't think I have a choice. I'm either going to live like this or I have to grow another rectum because I need a rectum. And he just looked at me and he said, if anybody can do it, Allyne, you can. So that started the next phase.
And what was the first thing you did in that phase?
My husband bought me Dr. Joe Dispenza's online progressive intensive workshop. And I had been going to some physical therapy, so I was doing some exercises at home. And I would listen to the lectures while I exercised. every day. Every day. I was like in this loop of listening to the same lecture over and over and over. And the interesting thing about doing something like that, I mean, you would think it's boring, but I would often feel like, oh, I never heard him say that before. Obviously, now I think I heard it, but when you learn something else or if you approach something differently, it it resonates in a different way.
Repetition is the mother of skill. And these advanced concepts, you can hear them many, many, many times. Well, you must have even just uncovered that in your Buddhist practices. You can hear the same thing over and over again. And one year it makes this amount of sense. And then a decade later, it makes this amount of sense.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's so fascinating how that happens. Yeah, so that is what I believe happened. So I would just listen to the lectures over and over, and then, as you go through this online workshop, you get to a point where you're doing a meditation, and I would do whatever meditation came up. Now, mind you, while I'm doing all of this, I'm still running to the bathroom. There was absolutely no time in my life. There was no hour in my life where I wasn't in the bathroom. And sometimes I would be in the bathroom for 45, 50 minutes. So listening to something, or when I started the meditations, it was a challenge to learn how to do the meditations because I would have to stop and go to the bathroom.
What do you think it was it about him or his teachings, or did you hear from somebody else certain successes? What sparked you to be so consistent?
I think I had the benefit of already having a discipline. So that's a good thing. I know when people start something new, just the regularity of it is. So I already was a disciplined person. So doing something regularly was something I'd been doing for 55 years, no big deal. In terms of his work, his lectures and what he talked about in terms of connecting, he calls it source. I call it the law of the universe. People call it God. It's all the same thing. Connecting with it was something that Buddhism has talked about for thousands of years. And as soon as I started listening to his lectures, I was like, yes, Buddhism has been saying that forever.
Well, isn't that a tremendous, because you shared that in your practice, again, you had already conditioned those muscles to going into a state where you were connecting with the universe. Isn't that a form of heart and brain coherence?
Yes, I believe it is. I believe it is. And knowing that I had overcome, when you're traumatized as a child, many people carry tremendous amount of hate and anger, resentment. And knowing that I had overcome that using this practice, using tapping into the power of the universe, I felt like what Dr. Joe was saying, and I felt like what the meditations were doing was fast tracking it. Because Buddhism is a really slow practice. And it's like, you take out the piece of coal and you polish it for years and years and years until you finally have this diamond. But I love that. I love that approach, but I felt like a lot of things that he was saying were allowing me to fast track. And so that resonated with me. It also resonated with me because Buddhism also talks about cause and effect, and also often talks about it in terms of long term. You make a cause, you don't know when the effect will happen. It's there. And so I was conditioned to long-term effects. Talking about cause and effect right here, right now, was encouraging. And I felt like that's what I need. I need to change right now. Buddhism also says everything can change in a single moment. And I thought, well, that's what I need.
Beautiful. I love that. So, I mean, what you're sharing is so powerful that you had already been conditioned to change your state and then suspend the being able to see it in 3D for a period of time. How long did it take you to start seeing benefit from your disciplined practice?
From the meditation part,
Yeah, from discovering Joe's work and applying it.
I did do the meditations every day. I was determined, I'm going to give this a shot.
Was 45 minutes or so each day, more or less?
Well, most of the meditations in that, all I had was the intensive progressive meditations. I think there are 7 or 8. That's all I had. I didn't have access to any other meditations. So it was the same 7 or 8 over and over and over again, which I think was good because I learned how to quickly go into that realm, that place that I felt like he was trying to take me to connect beyond myself. And I think a lot of them are 45 minutes, but for me, meditations took longer than that because I might start a meditation and have to go to the bathroom.
Were you able to get yourself in a mindset that it was a loving, enjoyable thing that you were doing, or was it like something you had to do in order to get a result?
It was always fun.
Really?
I loved it. I loved it. I just thought, oh my gosh, this is a perfect segue from the chanting, which is outside of me in a way, to going inward. And I loved it. I felt I got so good at it. And I don't know, I can't say I'm really a good meditator, but I got so good at it that when I had to push stop and go to the bathroom for however long it was, and I came back and hit play, I could be right back there. I got to the point where there was no gap in coming out of myself. Oh my gosh, I have to go to the bathroom, and going right back into myself. I got really good at that.
That seems like the very definition of a good meditator.
Okay.
Well, honestly, that you were able to do it with joy and looking forward to it rather than, because I think a reason why many people, including myself many times, have failed at meditation is that it's a must do, it's a have to in order to get a result. And you were in the joy of the moment. It sounds like your Buddhist practice really set you up well for success with that.
I agree. I think it did. Having that ability to be disciplined already. And what I loved about the meditation was I could go inward and be nowhere because being in my body was no fun. And I really wanted to be somewhere else. When I was meditating, I could get out of thinking about how bad the situation was. And it was comfortable. And I think I approached it more of a, well, what do you have to lose? Because this life is not that great, and this body is not serving you that well. So what do you have to lose except to try the formula, except to jump in and do it?
And how long was it, this committed, I'm fully present in this experience of doing it as recommended? What kind of period of time went by before you noticed a shift and a change?
I started in August and nothing changed. 1 week, 2 months, nothing changed. And it was October. It was about mid-October. So what's that? August, September. At least 2 months. One day I was sitting in my chair and suddenly had the urge to go to the bathroom. And it just hit me. It hit me like a rock on the head that I had been sitting there for 30 minutes with no sense of having to go to the bathroom. I'm telling you, that was huge because I had the sensation of needing to use the bathroom all the time. I couldn't sleep more. I was so exhausted. I was sleeping maybe 10 minutes at a time, which isn't enough to get into REM sleep or get fully rested or anything. That was significant. Not feeling like I had to use the bathroom for 30 minutes. That was significant.
And then what was the next signpost that you got that you were continuing to improve?
It just kept getting better. A couple of weeks, I was having moments. I was having moments where I didn't feel the urgency. I was having moments where I just felt so much more hopeful. Like this wasn't going to be my life for the rest of my life. And
I had the privilege of interviewing Dr. Joe Dispenza's lead scientist, Hemal Patel, and I want to say that was a couple of years ago. And he said that you declared to him that you would be back when you had completed this process. Do you remember having that conversation with him?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And he's such a scientist. Okay, well, let me know. Yes, we did have that conversation.
So walk us through was that before or after you started to have this improvement?
That I saw him? Yeah. It was after. So what happened was, October, November, December, the oncologist wanted me to go for a follow-up, 6-month follow-up from the surgery. And I was still fairly incontinent. It was better. It was improving. And I went to see him and he pops in the room, how are you doing? And I looked at him and I said, how do you think I'm doing? And he was just stunned. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, I had that surgery and I've never been the same since. I've been dealing with incontinence since April. And my whole life has changed. I've been challenged. I've been struggling. It's been really hard. And he looked at me and said, well, why did you have that surgery? I know. That's exactly what I said. That's exactly how I looked. I said, you told me that the CAT scan was inconclusive, that I had to have the surgery, that I would die if I didn't. And he said, this is the first I heard of this. He said, but you didn't have any cancer. And I said, I cured that cancer? Because I kept saying, I'm going to cure this cancer. When I went for the lab report to the surgeon, she lied to me. Because I said to her, I told you I would cure this cancer. They did not find a single cell of cancer anywhere in everything they took out.
Do you have those lab reports?
I do. Yeah, Inner Health Coalition has all that information. So there I was trying to heal, trying to be a loving person, faced with, wow, they took out healthy organs. I'm in this position because they took out healthy organs. You feel violated. You feel cheated. Every negative emotion that I could imagine welled up in me that day. And I started to cry, knowing that she had removed healthy organs without a care. The same surgeon who all those months never called me, never checked in with me, never heard from her again. I drove home sobbing, just filled with rage and anger. And that lasted a good 2 or 3 weeks. I kept doing the meditations, but I felt like I had been kicked backwards. And finally, one day I got up and I said, you are going to have to overcome hating this woman and being angry at her, because as long as you do, you will not heal. The body, I know enough to know the body will not heal in an environment of rage and negativity and doubt. And oh my gosh. So I think probably the whole next month of meditation was focused on sending her love, even when I didn't want to. Every time she would come up in my mind, which was frequent because I was still in the bathroom a lot, I would just stop and close my eyes and see myself sending her love.
This is just the most empowering, powerful teaching. I'm so grateful you're here sharing this. What a story. I was just commenting on the teachings of forgiveness I've repeatedly said that gratitude and forgiveness are two of the most powerful forces on the earth. And when you're in a state of non-gratitude and non-forgiveness, you figured out that you can't heal that way. And what was it like to drop that weight that you were carrying around, and what happened next?
After, it was hard. It was hard. And it was also hard being distracted from feeling like I could heal. And it was a challenge. I need to go back just one little bit to one of the things that I started doing when I started meditating was visualizing and seeing the scar tissue from the surgery gone. Because of my background and the work I've done with other people, I know how scar tissue can be debilitating. It can also block connections, healthy connections in the body. And I knew I had a lot of scar tissue because I had seen a physical therapist who did some internal work. And she would just be like, oh my gosh, Allyne, you have a lot of scar tissue. It was so painful when she did the work. I would be sobbing. So that was one thing that I did. And then I had this block where I had to get over being angry. The next step was getting back to, okay, you're going to just send her love. Even though it often didn't feel real, I think it was the practice of it.
So it was a gradual thing. It wasn't just all of a sudden you realized I can't heal if I hang. It was a step-by-step thing.
I had to keep working at sending her loving energy. But I wanted to send her less and get back to focusing on my healing. And one of the things that I would do, and I don't know if this is important or not, for me it was, when I started a meditation, I got to the point where when I started, I would set my intention and my visualization at the very beginning, like maybe the first 1 minute. And then I wouldn't think about it again. I would spend my time and my energy in that meditation trying to go nowhere, be nothing, be no one, which is hard when you have an ego, you know. So that was one thing that I did with the meditations, and I got better and better at it as time.
Could you mention what so you knew that you had the scar tissue. Did you see like healthy tissue being there? Did you see the scar tissue melting? What was the thing that you did at the beginning before you went into nothing that allowed that to germinate and take precedence in your life.
Absolutely. That's what I would do. I would just see healthy tissue with no scar tissue. I would see that I would visualize the scar tissue just dissolving, like in a science fiction movie where, they have some little gadget and they can go like this and it just clears up, and it's gone. And I would visualize that. The other thing that I did was I would visualize growing my rectum. So I knew I had 3 centimeters, maybe 3.5, so I'm thinking, okay, well, you've got this and it's technically the rectum. So let's just stretch it. And I would visualize that stretching and going back to what it was. My approach to the visualization was matter of fact. Look, we know the liver can regenerate. We don't even think about it. We expect it, right? We know our skin, which is the biggest organ in our body, on our body, that we cut it. We don't even think about it. We don't send it energy. We don't say, heal, heal. We expect that it will heal. We know that it will. So that was my approach to the meditation was, I know, I expect this. I can do this. I can stretch this. And it got closer and closer to more often feeling like I had to run to the bathroom less. I was able to take, I could drive to town and not have to use the bathroom till I got there, which was great. Things like that started to change. And then I believe it was January, because I had the progressive intensive, I would get notifications of Dr. Joe's retreats. And the April San Diego was announced. And I said to my husband, who was an amazing guy, having someone believe in you is really important. Let me just say that as an aside. It's really important that people believe in you. I said, well, I need to go so they can heal me. I'm going to go to this retreat. I'm going to do the coherence healing. I'm going to be a Healy, and they're going to heal me. And he's like, okay. So I registered for this. Well, 2 weeks before I was going to go on this trip, still dealing with incontinence, but improving, was my 1-year follow-up colonoscopy. And I went in for that. And I said to the doctor, I need you to measure my rectum. I need you to measure my colon. I need you to take pictures. I want to see pictures of the scar tissue. I'm a very visual person. I said, I want measurements and I want pictures of everything. He's like, okay. So he's done. He comes in the room and he says, well, everything looks really good. There's no polyps and everything's great. And I said, well, what about the measurements? He goes, well, I didn't measure the rectum. I said, I asked you to measure the rectum. He goes, well, it looks like it's about 50% normal size. And I said, well, what does that mean? I don't know what that means. And he said, well, about 50%. Well, a normal rectum can be 12 to 15 centimeters, as I mentioned. And he said, well, it looks about 50%. So I'm guessing, okay, maybe I'm dealing with 6 centimeters now instead of 3. I don't know. All I know is that everything looked good. And I said, well, what about the pictures? I need to see the pictures of the scar tissue. He goes, that's really interesting. I didn't find any scar tissue.
Wow.
And then he says, of course, he's a traditional doctor, they did a really good job. So, anyway, so I drove to San Diego because I still couldn't get on a plane and be stuck in the seat. Went in to register, still thinking I'm going to be a Healy and they are going to heal me, and get registered. to discover that I was not selected as a Healy. And I was devastated. I was absolutely devastated. I left the room thinking, just kind of wandering around thinking, well, now what? Now what? And that only lasted about an hour. I very quickly was overcome with the feeling that, no, Allyne, the right place for you to be is as a healer, that you're going to have a better experience as a healer, which turned out to be true.
Amazing. One thing that just stands out over and over again from hearing your story is your ability to bounce back. It seems like this has happened to you your entire lifetime. And kudos, because I don't know how much I don't think you've shared your story a great deal, but you're a leader, a healer, and an inspiration.
Thank you. I feel fortunate. I feel fortunate that I've been able to take the trauma and the fear in my life and turn it into something to make me a better person. It took many years. I mean, I'm the person that if we had met even 30 years ago, you wouldn't have liked me. I wouldn't have liked you. I was that person still living in anger. And it's such a benefit to not be that person anymore. It's such a benefit to be someone who can change.
What is the feeling state for you now, today, versus right before you got diagnosed with the cancer? Do you feel lighter? Do you feel more whole? What's the feeling state?
I feel like, and this may sound bizarre. I feel like all of that happened to me for a reason. That day that I was going to surgery, I knew there was another reason. And now I know what that reason was, because somehow I was the person who could grow a rectum. I don't feel, people often say to me, oh, you're superhuman, you're a hero. And I think, I mean, what I did was superhuman, okay? But I'm not any different than anybody else. And I think that had to happen to me because I had the wherewithal to say, I'm going to do this. I can do this. I can be the first person. And I may not be the first person. I'm the first person we know of medically, but it doesn't mean I'm the first person. But I feel so fortunate that I was that person, that I was able to take this horrible, life-changing event and turn it into something that I could say, see, if I can do it, anybody can do it. I am just a common person.
So tell us about the reading that you finally got and what they saw. I know you had to needle them again to take pictures and do the measurements.
Yes.
Tell us the news that you received and what that felt like.
So I did not have a healing at the retreat. I came home. I had 2 coherence healings online. And then it turned out the colonoscopy I had right before the retreat wasn't, the doctor was disappointed. He goes, you weren't completely cleaned out, so you have to come back. So the retreat was April. I had a healing in June. I had a healing in May and June. And then I went for my return colonoscopy. Again, same story. I need you to take measurements. I don't want you to eyeball my rectum. I need you to take measurements. I had the sense that I had grown it, because by then I had really good control, really good bowel control. And I just kept thinking, there's that, intuition. It's like, this is something. This is something that needs to be recorded. So I was like, I need you to measure it. Take out whatever little instruments you use. Measure that. Measure my colon. Take the pictures. I want to see everything. So he did, and he comes out. And everything looks great. No polyps. Okay, what about the measurements? And he said, your rectum is 10 centimeters.
Wow.
Said, 10? 10. Are you sure? And of course, by now I'm annoying him. Yes, I'm sure. I said, do you remember the surgical report that said they left me about 3 centimeters? I don't remember that. And I said, do you remember in April you said you thought it was 50%? I don't remember that. I said, 10 centimeters. And I'm just going inside, I'm screaming and jumping up and down. And of course, again, being the traditional doctor, he says, I said, no, I grew that rectum. And he goes, no, they must have made a mistake. Meaning it wasn't really 3 centimeters they left me, it was 10. So he goes to leave, and I looked at all the pictures. Everything was great. The colon was measured at 72 centimeters. A colon is generally 82 centimeters. He goes to leave, and he stops at the curtain, and he turns around, and he says, oh, by the way, it's really strange. He said, your rectum is so tiny, very, very, I'm trying to think of the word he used.
You said a narrow stricture.
Stricture, thank you. And he said, we only see that in children. So my realization was, okay, I decided to stretch it. And that's exactly what I did. I stretched what little they left me, and I made it into a full rectum. And
you created brand new baby tissue.
brand new. Yeah. I may be 74, but my rectum's only 4.
Of that. So what do you envision yourself doing with this treasure chest of experience that other people would love to emulate?
Well, I've had many people reach out to me, people who have seen my video or who saw the talk I gave in Cancun. And I've been spending a lot of time talking to people on the telephone around the world, on Zoom calls. And I finally have created a website to make it easy for people to find me.
Fantastic.
And I really hope to be able to share my experience. I would just like to add one thing if I can.
Absolutely. Take as much time as you want.
This experience, as horrific and long and challenging as it was 17 months from the time I had the surgery to the time I was diagnosed with having 10 centimeters. One of the greatest things that has come out of it is, well, I have a rectum. It's wonderful. I can travel. I have normal control like everybody else, even if it's not 12 or 15 centimeters, it's functional. I learned how to trust the things that happen to me. They can look so horrific, and not having a rectum is horrific. But if I trust that I can get through this process, that I can change who and what I am and what is happening to me, I don't have to worry. And so now when things happen to me, I just do not say, oh my gosh, this is horrible. What am I going to do? My husband died last year, which was heartbreaking. And I was left with a decreased income. And I have never once since that day said, oh my gosh, I don't have any money. I just don't say that. I don't live in that fear. And somehow, I'm not even really sure how, every month, enough money comes to me to get by and pay my bills and run my farm and do other things. So I feel that we can take the most horrific things that we think are happening in our lives. And if we trust that something really wonderful can come out of it, we change. But by changing ourselves, I can change my environment too. I don't have to worry about the bad things. This was a bad thing, and I was able to make it into something so good. So I really hope, I like to be able to talk to people. Reaching people it's just wonderful. People have so much power. And what I hear a lot is them not believing they have that power. I think that's a key piece.
I love the title of Dr. Joe's book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. There's the familiar, the well-known saying, the mind prefers a familiar hell to an unfamiliar heaven. What would you say about somebody transitioning out of that familiar hell to the unfamiliar heaven?
When I think one of the biggest things is letting go of your fears. I think if we knew what that heaven would feel like, it wouldn't be anything we would think about. It would be, of course I don't want this. Of course I want that. But I think we get so stuck in that, and we think, I'm not good enough for that. Or I can't do that. Maybe she could do it, but I can't do it. Or that we don't believe enough in ourselves and our own power. We come into this life with so many conditions put on us that we're truly stuck there. For me, the practice of meditation, and of course, 50 years of Buddhism, has taught me that I don't have to know how I'm going to get over there. I don't have to worry about it or try to even achieve it. I just have to let it be. I'm not sure if that's an answer to your question, but I think that is the challenge, is letting go of that fear. I'm stuck. I'm not good enough. I've had so many people say things to me like, well, I can't do that. Okay. Again, I'm not famous. I'm not young. I'm not well known. And, there's so many other people that this could have happened to, that could have regenerated their rectum. But it didn't. It happened to just a very common person like me. And I think that's crucial because, Dr. Joe often says that it's the common person doing the uncommon.
So my final question is, how do you stay focused on accomplishing the impossible and make that possible?
I've learned how to make it fun. When I meditate, I still set my intention at the beginning and then just go where I can into the meditation. But when things happen, the negative things that happen, I'm like, oh, okay, where's this going to go? This can be so exciting. Where is this going to go? When we realize we have the power to change that, that's what I learned, is I have the power. So I like to have fun with life. I mean, I have a lot of friends in there. So I recently took a trip. This is a very small example, but I took a trip to Tennessee and then on to Chicago, had a layover in Dallas when they were having tornado warnings and, all of this. And I arrived for my stopover, my layover. My flight has been delayed. I'm like, okay. And I'm walking around. I get another buzz and I look at my phone. Your flight has been canceled. Click here for your refund. And I thought to myself, well, that doesn't work for me. I'm not interested in a refund. I'm interested in getting to Tennessee. And I look up and every single person in the airport is doing the same thing. They canceled every flight out of Dallas. And I just kind of, I could go on for another 10 minutes. The point is I didn't freak out. Everybody was freaking out. They're on their phones. I just kind of wandered around, met this person who took me to this other person. And within 1 hour, I was on another flight, booked on another flight out of there, maybe one of a handful of people. I didn't panic. I didn't worry about, now what am I going to do? I've learned how to trust that feeling, and it's fun.
I love that. And you've conditioned your neurology to enjoy the things that actually bring you the health, the peace, the happiness. That's incredibly beautiful. Thank you so much for being here, Allyne. What is your website name?
AllyneBetancourt.com.
Great. So we'll just spell that for people. It's Allyne Betancourt, actually, I'm going to have you, Betancourt. Did I get that right?
Correct. With no space in between. Yeah.
Fantastic. And of course, we'll put that in the show notes. Is there anything else you'd like to say in the last couple of minutes here?
No, this was a fun discussion. Thank you for having me on your show. And congratulations on your 1,000. I saw that announcement. Yay.
Thank you so much. Folks, share this with anyone you know that would benefit from hearing it. Please click subscribe and leave us a comment, and we'll see you on the next episode of Next Level Healing. This podcast is intended for the purpose of providing information and education. It does not provide advice and is not meant to be used for any self-diagnosis or the replacement of any kind of licensed professional. The creators and individuals appearing here do not endorse any specific tests, positions, medications, products, or procedures. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent.